Hi, friend. Before we get into today's episode, here's a heads up. This week, I'm bringing back an ENCORE episode from the archive. It's episode 102 on how to stop rambling. And I'm re-releasing it because the questions I keep hearing in coaching sessions and workshops tell me this is still one of the biggest confidence drains for high-performing women leaders. If you've ever walked out of a meeting thinking, why did I keep talking? This one is for you. Here it is.
Welcome to Communicate to Lead, the podcast that empowers leaders and aspiring leaders to communicate with clarity and impact. I'm Kele Belton, CEO and successful entrepreneur, and your host for today. I'm here to equip you with all the essential tools and strategies to master effective communication and lead your team to success. As the founder and CEO of The Tailored Approach, my goal is to empower you to be the best leader you can be. So sit back, relax, and join me in today's episode as we dive into the art of communicating like a true leader.
Have you ever walked away from a meeting thinking, I talked way too much, or noticed people's eyes glazing over mid-explanation? Maybe you felt that moment of panic when you realize you've been talking for 3 minutes straight without taking a breath. These moments are not just uncomfortable, they can seriously undermine your leadership presence and influence. But today, I'm going to help you transform those rambling tendencies into clear, powerful communication. Welcome back to Communicate to Lead, the podcast that helps you elevate your leadership through powerful communication. I'm your host, Kele Belton, communication and leadership facilitator, coach, and consultant. Today, as I mentioned, I'm sharing powerful strategies to help you communicate with clarity, impact, without the ramble. The truth is, as leaders, every word we speak carries weight. When we dilute our message with unnecessary details or circular explanations, we are not just wasting time. We're actively undermining our authority and credibility with every extra sentence. So if you've ever wished you could be more concise and impactful in your communication, this episode is specifically for you. By the end of our time together, you'll have practical frameworks and tactics to help you speak with precision and power. Before we dive into solutions, let's confront the uncomfortable truth about why brilliant, capable leaders like you find themselves rambling despite knowing better. Understanding these psychological triggers isn't only interesting, it's the key to breaking the pattern for good. I mean, have you ever wondered why, despite your best intentions, you find yourself going on and on and on? There are actually several psychological factors at play here. First, there's nervousness. When we are anxious, our brain releases stress hormones that can affect our ability to organize thoughts clearly. It's like your thoughts are racing ahead of your ability to filter them, so everything comes tumbling out of our mouths. Then there's uncertainty. When we are not 100% confident about our message or how it will be perceived, we tend to keep adding information in the hopes that somewhere in that verbal flood will hit on the exact point that will resonate with our listener. I see this happening frequently with women leaders who feel they need to establish their credibility by demonstrating just how much they know. The irony is that over-explaining often achieves the exact opposite effect. Another common trigger is the fear of silence. Have you noticed how uncomfortable pauses can feel in conversations? Many of us ramble to fill those gaps, perceiving silence as awkward rather than powerful. And finally, there's the desire to be thorough. Leaders, especially those with expertise in their field, often feel responsible for providing complete information. You want to make sure you've covered all the bases, addressed potential questions, and demonstrated your knowledge. But here's something crucial to understand. Rambling significantly affects your credibility as a leader. When you can't communicate concisely, people might wonder if you can think clearly. They might question your confidence or even your competence. Research in communication psychology shows that concise speakers are generally perceived as more authoritative and confident. One study from Princeton University, researchers found that using simpler language was associated with higher ratings of intelligence, which is contrary to the common belief that complex vocabulary signals brilliance. So let's talk about the power of conciseness. When you communicate with precision, several things happen. One, you signal respect for your listeners' time and attention. Two, you demonstrate confidence in your message. Three, you make it easier for people to understand and remember your key points. And number four, you create space for dialogue rather than a monologue. Think about the leaders you admire. I'm willing to bet they are able to articulate complex ideas with remarkable clarity. They don't need to use 20 words when 5 will do. This is your opportunity to become that kind of communicator. Someone who doesn't cut corners or oversimplify, but who can distill brilliant thinking into its most potent form. Now, let's move on to developing greater self-awareness around your communication patterns. Before you can change a habit, you need to recognize when it's happening. So how do you know when you're starting to ramble? The first step is to identify your personal rambling triggers. These are the situations or emotions that tend to set off your tendency to over-explain. And common triggers include high-pressure situations like presentations or important meetings, conversations with people you perceive as intimidating or judging, topics you're particularly passionate or knowledgeable about, when you try to convince someone who seems skeptical, or when you're uncertain or making things up as you go. And we can all recognize ourselves in one of those situations. So take a moment to reflect on when you most find yourself talking too much. Is it in meetings, one-on-ones with your boss, when you're explaining complex topics, or when you're nervous? Understanding your triggers allows you to prepare specifically for these situations. Next, let's talk about verbal cues or phrases that signal you're starting to ramble. Think of these as your personal ramble alerts, if you will. They might include using phrases like also and another thing or one more point multiple times. Starting sentences with sort of, kind of, or basically. Repeating yourself using slightly different words, but essentially saying the very same thing. Using filler phrases like, you know what I mean, or if that makes sense. And lastly, apologizing for taking so long to explain something. When you catch yourself using these phrases, it's a signal to wrap up your point. Another powerful awareness technique is the body language check. Our bodies often give us feedback before our minds catch up. Signs to watch out for include your listener's eyes wandering or glazing over, people glancing at their watches or phones, fidgeting or shifting in seats, decreased eye contact or engagement, your own increased speaking pace, or shortness of breath. I've developed a quick self-check that you can do during any conversation. I call it the present, point, pause, or PPP for short. P, present. Are you fully present in this conversation? The second P stands for point. Do you know the main point you're trying to make right now? And the last P stands for pause. Can you pause briefly to recalibrate if needed? This quick mental check can help you stay focused and aware during important conversations. The key is practicing these awareness techniques until they become second nature. So try them in low-stakes situations so that by the time you are in a high-stakes conversation, you no longer have to think about the 3 Ps: present, point, pause. So start with one meeting or conversation per day. And remember, the goal isn't to become self-conscious, but rather self-aware. This awareness creates the space for meaningful change. Okay, let's get into some practical frameworks that can transform how you organize your thoughts and communicate more concisely. The first framework I want to share is what I call the 3-point rule, and you have probably heard different iterations of this rule. This simple but powerful approach suggests that you limit yourself to 3 key points in any discussion or presentation. And if you're wondering why 3, research shows that people generally remember information better when it's grouped into 3s. Think about it. We have ready, set, go, or life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Our brains are naturally wired to process and recall information in groups of 3. So here's how to apply this rule. Number 1, before your conversation or meeting, identify the 3 most important points you need to make. And secondly, structure your communication around these points, stating them very clearly. Third, elaborate only as much as necessary to ensure your audience understands what you are trying to share with them. And lastly, number 4, when you have covered your 3 points, stop talking or transition to a question. The discipline of limiting yourself to 3 key points forces you to prioritize and organize your thoughts more effectively, because now you can't share all the information. So if you had to share only 3 things, what would those 3 things be? The second framework I want to share with you is what I call the headline first approach. This is not my framework. It's a framework that's out on the internet that so many people talk about. And it's exactly what it sounds like. You start with your conclusion or main point, then provide supporting details only as needed. Think of it like a newspaper article. The headline tells you the main point. The first paragraph gives you the essential information, and the rest of the article provides additional context and details. So when you are communicating as a leader, start with your bottom line up front. For example, we need to push back the product launch by 2 weeks because of quality concerns. Here's another example. I recommend we hire candidate B because she has the specific experience we need. And lastly, the new policy will increase efficiency by streamlining the approval process. Give them the bottom line up front. This is your main point. If they remember nothing else, you want them to remember that main point. Namely, I recommend we hire candidate B because she has the specific experience we need. Only after stating your headline should you provide the supporting evidence or explanation. And even then, keep it focused and relevant. And here is a third and final framework, which is one of my favorites that I learned when I was improving my communication skills. And it's called the what, so what, now what structure. This is particularly useful for making recommendations or discussing complex issues. The what is where you state the facts or situation clearly. The so what is where you explain why it matters or what the implications are. And then lastly, the now what is where you provide next steps or recommendations. For example, our customer satisfaction scores have dropped 12% this quarter. This matters because customer retention directly impacts our bottom line, and these numbers suggest we could lose significant revenue if the trend continues. I recommend we immediately form a task force to identify root causes and develop an action plan by the end of the month. Notice how this approach of the what, so what, now what approach gives you a complete picture while staying concise and action-oriented. So there you have it, 3 frameworks that you can use right away. And these frameworks aren't about simply being theoretical. They are practical tools you can start using immediately. Choose one that resonates with you and try implementing it in your next meeting or presentation. Now, you might be thinking, these frameworks sound great, Kele, but how do I actually prepare for conversations without over-scripting or sounding rehearsed? That, my friend, is a valid question. And it brings us to our next segment on preparation strategies, because I love a good preparation strategy. It helps me feel confident. I go into a conversation knowing exactly what I want to talk about. And even if we get off track, I know how to bring us back to what is crucial and what is important. And the key to sounding both prepared and natural is what I call structured flexibility. You want enough structure to keep you focused, but enough flexibility to engage authentically with your audience or listeners. Let's start with how to prep for high stakes conversations. First, get clear on your intention. Before preparing any content, ask yourself, What is the one thing I want my listener to know, feel, or do after this conversation? Why does this matter to them and not only to me? And lastly, what potential obstacles or objections might my audience or listener have? With these answers in mind, you can start preparing more purposefully. Next, create an outline, not a script. I recommend using one of the frameworks we just discussed to structure your outline. For instance, identify your 3 key points or organize your thoughts using the what, so what, now what structure. Write down your main points as concise bullets, not complete sentences. This prevents you from memorizing and reciting, which often leads to more rambling when you lose your place or your train of thought. And then, of course, use the headline first. What is the main point? What is the one thing you want your audience to remember if they remember nothing else? Now, let's talk about creating mental anchors for your key points. If you don't want to take some notes with you that you can refer to, you can use mental anchors. And mental anchors are memory devices that help you stay on track without referring to notes. And these can be vivid images that represent each of your key points, a simple acronym that reminds you of your structure, a metaphor that ties all your points together, or physical gestures that correspond to different parts of your message. For example, if you have 3 points that talk about innovation, customer service, and team development, you might visualize a light bulb for innovation, a handshake for customer service, and a ladder for team development as your mental anchors. Another powerful preparation strategy is to practice the art of pausing. The more you pause, the better it is for you. Many of us rush to fill the silences, but strategic pauses serve multiple purposes. They give you time to gather your thoughts. They create emphasis around important points that you are sharing. They allow your listener to process what you have shared with them, and they help you regulate your pace. So if you are one of those speakers who speak exceptionally fast, especially when you are nervous, using some strategic pauses will help slow your pace just a little bit so that your audience can catch up to what you are telling them. Try practicing your key points with intentional pauses. It might feel uncomfortable at first, but you'll be surprised at how these moments of silence can enhance your message rather than weakening it. One exercise I recommend is the timer talk. And this is an exercise that I do with my own coaching clients. Set a timer for 60 seconds and practice making one complete point within that time frame. This trains you to be concise while still delivering value. For example, let's say you need to explain a new project timeline to your team. Your timer talk might sound something like this. We need to launch our Q2 campaign by May 15th to coincide with the conference. Working backward, final assessments are due April 30th, giving us 2 weeks for approval. Our key milestones are strategy completion by the 10th, drafts by the 20th, and revisions by the 28th. Everyone's specific deadlines are in the shared document. It's tight, but doable if we make this a priority. Notice how that explanation covered all the essentials in about 30 seconds or more without rambling. The point was made clearly without unnecessary details or repetition. And of course, this is where if people have questions, if your listeners, your audience, if they have any questions, they can ask the questions, and then you get into a conversation, into a dialogue by you sharing more details. But don't assume that people want all of the information that you have about the particular project. So try recording yourself doing timer talks, and you'll quickly identify where you can tighten your communication. And remember, the goal of preparation isn't to script and memorize every word, but to create a clear roadmap that allows you to navigate the conversation with confidence and purpose. Even with the best preparation and frameworks, there still will be times when you find yourself rambling. I have been in that situation. My clients have been in that situation. So the question is, what do we do when we have prepped, when we have the frameworks, and we still find ourselves rambling? Because the good news is that there are graceful ways to recover in real time. Let's explore some tactics for catching yourself mid-ramble and get yourself back on track. First, let's talk about how you can cut yourself short when you notice you're going off track. The key is to do this without undermining yourself or apologizing. Here are 4 phrases you can use to stop rambling and get the message on track. 1, let me bring this back to the main point and then offer your main point. 2, the key takeaway here is share what the key takeaway is. 3, to summarize what I'm saying, then give them that quick summary. And lastly, number 4, in essence, what this means for you or what this means for us is give them what that means. These transitions acknowledge that you refocusing without drawing unnecessary attention to the fact that you are rambling, and you don't need to apologize for anything. Another effective technique is what I call the bookend method. When you realize you've gone off on a tangent, simply refer back to your original point, and you can use one of the following phrases. As I mentioned earlier about the importance of customer service. Second phrase, coming back to the question of resource allocation. And lastly, to connect this back to our quarterly goals, share what that means. This technique of bookend method creates a sense of intentionality. Make it seem like the tangent was part of your plan all along. But sometimes the best way to recover from rambling is to shift the focus from you to the listener. And you can do this by simply asking strategic questions. Here are some questions that you could potentially ask your listener or your audience. How does that align with your experience? What aspects of this are most relevant to your current challenges? Which of these approaches seem most feasible for your team? And here is where you start opening up the dialogue with your listener or with your audience instead of simply giving them a ton of information. These questions not only give you a moment to regroup, but they also engage your listener and make the conversation far more collaborative. Another recovery tactic is what I call the flag and focus technique. When you realize you're getting too detailed or going off track, you can flag it and refocus. And here are 2 examples I'd like to share. First one, let me zoom out to the bigger picture here. That's the phrase you want to use. And then tell them why this matters, which is that this project will increase customer retention by at least 15%. The technical implementation details are important, but our priority is delivering that business outcome. That's one example. The second example focuses on the phrase, the key principle that ties all this together, and then you share why this matters or what that key principle is. So here's the example. The key principle that ties all of this together is our commitment to employee well-being. Each of these policy changes supports that core value, whether through flexibility, recognition, or growth opportunities. This demonstrates strategic thinking and shows respect for your listeners' time and attention. Notice how each redirection brings the conversation back to the most important point, which is the so what that makes your message matter to your audience. Finally, remember that humor can sometimes be your best ally. A light, self-deprecating comment like, I can tell I'm getting too excited about this topic, can acknowledge the rambling without making it awkward. And I know for myself, this is one that I easily fall into when I get too excited about a particular topic or project, that I start sharing far more than I need to. And this light humor that I bring in ensures that people know and they are aware that I know that I get too excited, and that it brings us back to what's important, what's the key point, what's the main point, what's the headline. The most important thing to remember is that recovering from rambling gets easier with practice. Don't give up. It'll be tough in the beginning, but the more you do it, the easier it will get. Each time you successfully redirect yourself, you are building the neural pathways that will make concise communication more natural over time. As we wrap up today's episode, let's recap the key strategies we've discussed for communicating more concisely. We explored the psychology behind rambling and how conciseness actually enhances your leadership presence. We talked about self-awareness techniques to recognize when you are starting to ramble or over-explain, including identify your personal triggers and verbal cues. We covered practical frameworks like the 3-point rule, the headline first approach, and the what, so what, now what structure. We discussed preparation strategies that give you the right balance of structure and flexibility. And finally, We shared real-time focus tactics for those moments when you need to redirect your communication to what matters most. And remember, becoming more concise isn't about limiting your expertise or passion. It's about distilling your brilliance into its most impactful form. When you communicate with clarity and purpose, you demonstrate confidence in your message, mastery of your subject matter, and respect for your listeners' time, which are all qualities of an exceptional leader. So here's my challenge to you. This week, identify one recurring situation where you tend to provide far more detail than necessary. Maybe it's your next team meeting, one-on-ones with your boss, or when explaining technical concepts. Whatever that is, choose one specific context. Then apply the headline first approach we talked about today. Start with your bottom line up front. What is the one thing you want your audience, your listener, to remember and to walk away with, even if they remember nothing else? Then follow that up by sharing some supporting details only if it's necessary. Notice how it changes both your delivery and your listener's response. Do they seem more engaged? Are decisions made more quickly? Does the conversation feel more productive? Thank you so much for tuning in today. I truly appreciate you spending this time with me and investing in your leadership communication skills. I would love to hear how this goes for you. Connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram. You can find my profiles in the show notes. Your experiences help shape future episodes of this podcast. And if you found value in today's strategies, please share this episode with another leader in your network who might benefit. Because together we can build a community of powerful, precise communicators and leaders. Until next Thursday, my friend, I am Kele, reminding you that great communication is the foundation of inspiring leadership. Keep learning, keep growing, and remember to communicate to lead.